Well, another Sunday, end of August 2025. Flying by. Yes. So, we are going to get into a talk on aggression and compassion today. So, one of the things that I wanted to get into first is just how we approach everything here on a Sunday morning. You're familiar with that story, I'm sure, of the elephant and the five blind men. And when the elephant's brought in, remember the king asks for the elephant to be brought in. And then he has five blind men standing at different parts of the elephant: the ear, the tail, the leg, the trunk, the body. And then he asks, "What's in front of you?" And each blind man gives his perspective of what is the elephant. And each one is saying something different. And so each blind man is arguing with the other blind men about what the elephant is. And the king just sits there, taking the whole thing in, and laughs. And this is a very deep illustration on many levels. One way it's been interpreted is the five blind men represent the five senses. And so our senses can't really experience the reality as it is directly. And so in a way, we're all blind if we're just living by the five senses. Another way that it's been expressed, and kind of where we're going this morning, is that each philosophical and religious tradition has their own take on what the elephant or God or reality is. And so each perspective of each tradition dogmatizes the view and says this is what God is, this is what reality is, this is what nirvana is. And they become completely hedged into their system and their perspective, and they seem to want to argue with the other perspectives, declaring that they are wrong. And so what you get in the experience of, or the illustration of the story, is the king is watching the whole thing. And this kingly perspective is often referred to as the Raja Vidya, right? Raja means royal, and Vidya means knowledge. And this is what we do on a Sunday morning. We try to give this perspective. Raja Vidya, the initiatic knowledge, the royal knowledge. Yogananda calls it the royal science of God realization. And this is the perspective where you can see all the different points of view and recognize directly what is being seen in terms of the entirety of the elephant. Right? So we want to look at that in terms of what happens when we only have a certain portion of understanding, this indirect knowledge that the blind men have. And it causes aggression. Because one of the things that you'll see in the story is that they're arguing, they're attacking, they're insulting one another, because each one has a limited view, and in their limited view, there's anger. If you have the unlimited view of the king, there's laughter, right? That's the story. He laughs when he sees them arguing. So what is cause for argument and aggression from one perspective is actually cause for laughter and enjoyment, in a sense, from another. And so this is why that famous saying that Jesus says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." So it's not that the truth sets you free, the truth is, but it's you knowing the truth that allows you to be freed. It brings you to that place of seeing reality as it is, not indirectly like a blind man. And so we want to look at the fact that our aggression, our anger, only comes from ignorance. When we have awakened to who we are, we actually can't be angry. This is the teaching. It's not that we're there yet, but it is certainly the proof of the pudding that when we flower into our truth, as Jesus says in A Course in Miracles, you'll realize that you're never angry at a fact. You're angry at an interpretation. So it's our own minds and their limited understanding that causes the anger. So we want to realize that in this place that we currently find ourselves in, that we have work to do, you might say. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about this morning. We're going to be talking about mind training. Okay, so mind training is very much like physical training. There's a commitment, there's discipline, there's vigilance. There are things that we have to cultivate and look at. And this mind training, we see it again in A Course in Miracles. He actually says it very simply and to the point. He says, this course is a course in mind training. And he says in the beginning to the workbook of the course, an untrained mind can accomplish nothing. Right? So we're going to see that training the mind is necessary because what we all have within us in potential is this deeper knowledge that will set us free, that will heal us from all of our aggression and anger and hatred. But we have to put in the time, and we actually have to, as we're going to see when we look into the Buddhist path, we're going to have to actually confront where we are holding these pockets and perspectives of aggression and anger, right? Because one of the things that marks our age that we're currently living in is everybody's a blind man with a certain perspective, and all we're used to doing now is yelling at each other. Like our culture has now become so fomented with this hostility that when we look at things from our perspective, we're always having a boogeyman to attack. So whatever perspective we're taking, there's always a split in our consciousness where the dark side is something else, someone else, and it deserves our ire. It deserves our hatred. It deserves our aggression and disdain. It's the mark of our age. It's the mark of Kali Yuga, if you want to look at it in terms of the Hindu view, that consciousness goes through these stages or yugas or ages of getting bright and waning and going dark. We're in the dark age. And so what really spawned this talk in my mind was the teaching that's given in Matthew's Gospel in chapter 24 towards the end of the Gospel, where the disciples actually asked Jesus, what are the signs of the end of the age? Because in the Hebrew, generally speaking, but in the Platonic, the Hebrew, the Hindu, we understand these calendrical cycles in terms of they culminate into periods of deep unrest, political upheaval, world wars, and then the eventual flowering or release or return to the divine knowledge. But this is cyclical. And so the Hebrews inherited this tradition probably from Egypt, but it was really sort of a secret doctrine throughout all the world that the ages do come to an end. There are cycles within consciousness. And so the disciples are asking Jesus, what's the end of the cycle look like? And he gives kind of a telling perspective. Many of us have probably heard this before. I'm only going to read very little of it. But he says, take heed that no one deceives you. This is the first thing he says when asked, what are the signs of the end of the age? And he says, beware that no one deceives you. So what that basically means is there's a lot of deception. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of disinformation, right? A lot of propaganda. Don't be deceived. Don't take things at face value. Don't get befuddled and beguiled by appearances. Don't be deceived. That means you have to be self-reflective, insightful, awake, aware. And then he says, for many will come in my name, saying I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and plagues, or pandemics, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then he says, many will be offended. Get this now. Many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Like, this is one of the marks of our sensitivity in our culture. Like, your words are an assault. You are hurting me with your perspective. I'm offended at what you say. Like, this has been part of the culture war for a little while now. You know, sometimes Lisa and I will talk about, and even see sometimes portrayed in film, what it was like 100 years ago, 150 years ago, when people were really kind of just eking out a living and struggling to survive, and kids were going into the factories, or, you know, even earlier working on the reservations, or the, you know, kind of pioneering. Life was very different, and people had much tougher skin, and they were able to endure hardships that we can't even imagine now. So to where we are so tender and vulnerable and sensitive, that somebody's words are a crime in our mind, that we need safe spaces, and we can't have dialogue, and we just yell at each other. Like, this is all the mark of the end of the age. This is what he's saying, that we're offended by one another, and we betray one another, and we will hate one another. Right? This is one of the, like I said, what was starting to spur this talk in my mind is this acceleration of hatred that we're seeing in the culture. And then he says, and because of lawlessness, and because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. So lawlessness, anomia in Greek, means corruption. Because there's so much corruption, we will start to really lose heart. We will feel like, what's the point? Like our society, our culture, it's circling the drain. Like there seems to be no way to pull out of the nosedive. Everything is so corrupt. Everything is so lawless. Everybody's just doing what they want, and the more money and the more power you have, the more you can oppress, dominate, and lie. And so this is where he says, because of the corruption, we will lose heart. And even if we were loving, even if we did grow up with this kindness and this compassion and wanting to be neighborly and reach out to others, that our culture, our society becomes so corrupt that even those warm-hearted people begin to grow cold. Right? And we can really check in, because I've noticed when I'm not in my spiritual ray, you might say, if I'm not in that vortex, it will take you out. Like, you'll look at the news, and if you're, kind of a voracious person like I am, and you look at all the different things that are going on in every area, you're just like, well, what's the point? It's just such a sick, sick world if you're looking below the veil of the propaganda. And so you can lose heart. You can, just kind of be deflated in your path, and kind of just want to crawl up and hide, kind of a thing. So this is where we, as spiritual seekers, have to realize that this is the sign of our culture. And so what is the remedy to our love growing cold? Well, we have to actually recognize that underneath is the hatred. Underneath is the aggression. Underneath is the unwillingness to look at ourselves. Right? So this is kind of why I wanted to tie this together with the teachings on the mind training. Because one of the things that is pointed out in both A Course in Miracles and in the Buddhist teaching is that our minds are actually projecting the reality that we're interacting with. And so whatever we're seeing projected out there is a direct result of our own karmic patterns, our own psychological state. And so the only way, as we're going to see what Shantideva was teaching, the only way to heal the world is you have to first look at yourself and where these points, these pain points of aggression and hatred are showing up within your heart, and address them directly, immediately, confront them. That's the only way that you can actually bring relief to other people's suffering, that you first give the remedy to yourself. Just like when you're going down in a plane and the masks drop and you have to, first put on your mask before you can help another put on their mask. This is the principle here. You have to get your head straight. You have to clear your mind and understand this deeper principle before you can help anyone else. And deep down, I think this is all what we want to do. We want to bring relief to people's suffering because we are warm-hearted, loving, and kind people. We love to love. We love to see people happy. We want to see a world that's not sick and corrupt. Like deep down, that's what we really want. And Lisa and I also talk about this. It's like, for many of us, like we're the last generation that grew up without having the internet in our early years. We weren't fixed to a screen. We weren't so inundated by the technological age. And there was a different quality to relationship and to society back then, even though it was, on a slippery slope from when we were young. It wasn't in such an accelerated state of lawlessness as it is now. And so we have that memory of what it was like to feel connected, to feel loved, to feel close to others in a way that was, deeply human and deeply compassionate. And so we don't want to lose that. We actually want to cultivate that. And that is the basis of the mind training. So just a brief word of what it could look like here, and then we'll get into some more of the poetic readings. So Jesus says in the Course, he says, "It has never really entered your mind to give up every idea you have ever had that opposes knowledge. You retain thousands of little scraps of meanness which prevent the Holy One from entering. Light cannot penetrate through the walls you make to block it, and it is forever unwilling to destroy what you have made. No one can see through the walls that you've set up in your mind." But then he says, "I can step around them." Right? So what he's saying here is also put within the Tibetan teachings that we'll be looking at. He's taking the role of guru or spiritual friend. And so the spiritual friend, capital F, already knows our true nature and knows how to look through the defense systems, the fear, the meanness that we've put up, the resistances that we have, right? So if we are willing to take on this mind training, we have this friend who is right here, ready to help us in our darkest times to go through these resistances, these fears, these resentments that we have. Then he says, "Watch your mind for the scraps of meanness, or you will be unable to ask me to do so. I can help you only as our Father created us. I will love you and honor you and maintain complete respect for what you have made, but I will neither love nor honor it unless it is true." Right? Bless you. So this is also an important principle for us because he's basically saying love, compassion, doesn't honor falsehood, doesn't love somebody's misperceptions. So when we talk about being compassionate and loving for one another, we're not there to prop up somebody's illusions about themselves or their perspective that's creating pain and suffering for them. Right? Sometimes we are too quick to join in somebody's story, and that story has a lot of conflict or projection or anger and aggression. And so he's saying basically, that's not love. and you don't honor somebody's illusion. You actually hold space for them to come out of that fever, but you in no way go into it to try to commiserate with them, right? That's not spiritual wisdom. That's not compassion. And it does take mind training, because we have certain relationships that have a gravitational pull, if you've noticed. So when we get around somebody and they're in their story, they're in their tales of woe, we get pulled like gravity. And all before you know it, we're commiserating. We're in the soup with them. So the mind training, much like that Raja, that king, steps back and considers the whole picture, recognizes that there's choice here. I don't have to go into the darkness as a form of love. That's not love. So even though there's a pull, there's a pattern, I've done it before, I'm going to train my mind to actually take a step back from that unconsciousness that has been, gripping me and enticing me to go in and try to fix or change or help somebody who really doesn't want help. They just want somebody to commiserate or to join in their picture, their story of suffering. So he says, I won't honor that and I won't love that if you're in the illusion. But he says, ask me truly and I'll come. So that's another important aspect as we begin to develop this deeper wisdom, right? Because the other thing that's really key to understanding the mind training of Buddhism and also in A Course in Miracles is compassion and wisdom go together. They're one bird with two wings, right? Wisdom is one wing, compassion is the other wing. You can't really have compassion without wisdom. You won't fly straight. You won't really fly. And so wisdom is this ability, as he's telling us, that when somebody's asking truly, now we can have a conversation. But if somebody's closed off in their mind and they just want you to join them in their illusions, that's not compassion. You wait, he says, and if you're not ready, he says, I'll wait with infinite patience until you're ready, until you truly ask. As soon as you truly ask, there I am, right? So that's an important aspect to know, like, why am I not receiving the comfort from God? Or why am I not feeling the presence of God? Why aren't my spiritual friends coming around me when they're, they've shown that they know this stuff and they're walking the path and they're not there for me right now? You might want to check in and see, like, am I not asking truly? Do I not want my illusions exposed? Do I not want to really look at myself and do the deep work or the mind training? Maybe that's why, right? Because remember, we're only getting what we want all the time. Our minds are doing this, whether it's pain or joy. Our minds are generating it. And he's saying, you'll have the higher help when you're ready to truly ask. And then he says, if you do not ask me truly, I will wait. I will never forsake you, any more than God will. But I must wait as long as you will to forsake yourself. Not look at yourself, not want the love of God in your heart, right? Because we're too used to going into the shadows, to the illusions, right? Because I wait in love and not in impatience, you will surely ask me truly. I will come gladly in response to a single unequivocal call. Watch carefully and see what it is you are truly asking for. Be very honest with yourself about this. For we must hide nothing from each other. Right? So this is part of the mind training that we're going to look at, as he's going to tell us in a few moments, that meditation is a core part of the mind training. This is where you actually perform mental hygiene, right? We brush our teeth every day. We take a shower every day. We use toilet wipes. We do a lot of different hygienic activities. But what about with our mind? Do we just let it wander into all the different places, the hell realms, the animal realms, the slums, the dungeons, the brothels? We just let our mind wander. And it's filthy. It gets caught into these muddy places, right? And it's omnivorous. It's eating all of the food of all of these different lower realms, right? And so we have to begin to bring our mind to heal. We have to tame our mind. And so meditation is the way that we tame our mind. And the first beginnings of the meditation process is we simply watch it. We breathe, we get into a rhythmical breath, but then we begin to just simply watch. We don't judge, we're just looking. And here in our conversation this morning, in our meditation today, we just want to look at where we have these scraps of meanness, where we're being mean, where we're being aggressive, where we have hatred, right? Just watching it. Because immediately when you watch it, there's the commentator, right? That's bad. Shouldn't do that. What kind of spiritual person are you? Or they deserve it. I'm not going to give this up because they're sons of bitches. So we have these scraps of meanness that we're either trying to justify or beat ourselves up over. Don't do that in the meditation. Just relax and watch. Give yourself the break of not having to comment on anything, but you want to directly look. This is part of that hygienic process. By shining the light of your awareness on these points of aggression and hatred and anger, it's like you're shining that light on the virus. And somehow bright light, in this case, will undo the virus. It can't grow. It can't fester. It can't live under the light of your watching. It only lives in the shadow. It only lives in the unconscious mind. The watchful mind, when it's looking at these places within itself directly, will begin to show that there's spaciousness here now, instead of these creatures of the shadow. So he says, watch carefully. Be very honest with yourself. Don't hide anything from yourself or from me, your spiritual friend. Now, you could even say on the human level, Jesus can be represented as your spiritual community, where you have spiritual friends, right? In the Buddhist teaching, you have the three jewels. You have the Buddha, which is the enlightened mind. You have the Dharma, which is the enlightened teaching that brings you into the realization of the enlightened mind. But you also have the Sangha. And the Sangha is the community. It's what keeps everything moving in the right direction. Your spiritual friends, your support system, what the Course will call your mighty companions. You cannot navigate this hateful, cold, and corrupt world without a spiritual community. So find your spiritual community. Find your friends who will represent the truth in you and will not honor the illusions. They won't love your misperceptions because they know who you truly are. And even if you're not ready to look, they know that eventually you will come to see that you want freedom. You want release. And so they will support you on the path if that's what you're looking for. And then he says this: in your own unconscious, deeply repressed by the ego, is the declaration of your release. This is the one fact which means that the ego does not exist and therefore makes it profoundly afraid. Right? So as we begin to watch our mind in meditation, and especially with this aggression and resistance and resentment and hatred that is so easily brought to awareness, we will realize this is like the ego's citadel within us. This is the way the ego really gets its juice, through anger and hatred and aggression. And as we begin to watch it and not talk about it, not allow our judgments to cloud us from just seeing what's there, he says eventually we realize that all of the story that we had around our anger, our aggression, under the silent watching of our meditation, it no longer seems true. We're not buying it. It begins to weaken. And then eventually it dissolves. And then we realize that was like a part of my personality, that story. That resentment was how I identified in that relationship. But now that I realize that this was all my own self-talk, this was my interpretation, this wasn't a fact. Once you start to see that, like you can sit here and, yeah, that kind of sounds logical. But until you actually allow that visceral experience to come on, you do the mind training, you got to do it. Then there's the release. Then there's this inner shift in the experience, right? And then you realize this was all my story. This wasn't a fact. I was not angry at what really happened. I was angry at what I thought happened. And now that I'm looking at it, the I thought is actually, doesn't even have the weight to rope me in anymore. Because I'm the witness here. I'm not the story. He says, the calm being of God's kingdom, which in your sane mind is perfectly conscious, right? This is what we're talking about. Your witnessing state that you will rest in, like that king sitting on his throne looking at the elephant. That calm mind is what will dispel all of the anger, the aggression, the hatred of the ego story. Right? That's your sane mind. It's already your mind. It's the sane part of you. But get a load of what he says. This sane mind, this witness that's able to shine a light on everything and dissolve whatever is hurting you, is ruthlessly banished from the part of the mind which the ego rules. So there's the lower mind that has its home as the body identity. Your name, your story, your sliding scale of desires and the way that you think of yourself through the five senses, right? And your association with other bodies who are doing the same. That mind that sees itself like that ruthlessly banishes the witnessing state of that Buddhic or Christic mind, your sanity. So as long as you are just living through the five senses in this lower mind, it's the definition of a psychosis. It's psychotic because you're banishing your sanity. And of course you're going to feel deprived. Of course you're going to have resentment because you're withholding everything from yourself. Your sane mind is a beam of God's sun, a wave of God's ocean, right? It is God. So when you are identified as your lower mind, as the body, you're banishing everything and you have nothing. And you will be in resentment. And when you have desires that are not being met, you will have aggression. But the thing is, the ego, when you're identified as your body, your story, this lower mind, it's not your fault. This is just who you are. So your resentment, your aggression, the feeling that you're being deprived, it's got to be something else going on in the world that's doing it to you. My own mental state isn't doing this to me. It's not because I'm banishing my sanity within my own higher mind. It's because of this political party. It's because of the economy. It's because of my child. It's because of that out there. So the lower mind will never come to sanity, and it will have justification for all of its resentments, right? This is where if you looked at the center of what's called the wheel of life in Buddhism, it's that amazing icon that's held by the god of death, or Yama. And you have the 6 realms of transmigration. You have the realm of the gods. You have the realm of the angry gods. You have the human realm. You have the animal realm. You have the realm of the hungry ghosts. And you have the realm of the hell beings. These are all the dimensions within the mind of samsara, the mind that doesn't know itself. And according to the Tibetan masters, not only can you go there when you die, you can go into the God realm and live for untold amounts of years, right? Very long lifespan in the God realm. Or you can go into the hell realm and live for untold amounts of years in the hell realm. You can go to these realms and it will feel like you're in this realm, but it's the hell realm. But the Tibetan masters say we go into these realms moment by moment. One moment you're in the God realm, one moment you're in the hell realm, one moment you're in the animal realm, one moment you're in the human realm. And you around and round it goes. And what's at the very center or hub of that wheel of the samsaric mind, the mind that doesn't know itself, is first the denial of what it is, represented by the pig, right? The pig is the ignorance, the denial, the unwillingness to know yourself. And then once that's in place and you don't know yourself and you're the ego identity, you have the snake, which is aggression, hatred, anger. And you have the rooster, which is lust and desire and attachment. And so the mind that doesn't know itself is driven by these two forces, aggression and lust, hatred and attachment. And round it goes. So the mind training has to deal with looking directly at your aggression, in this case our talk for today, and maybe another day we'll talk about the attachment and the lust and the desire that drives us. But these two impulses are what keeps the wheel going, right? And it ruthlessly banishes our Buddha mind, our Christ mind, from our awareness. So again, he says, the calm being of God's kingdom, which in your sane mind is perfectly conscious, is ruthlessly banished from the part of the mind which the ego rules. The ego is desperate because it opposes literally invincible odds, whether you are asleep or awake. Now listen, consider how much vigilance you have been willing to exert to protect your ego, and how little vigilance you have been willing to expend to protect your higher mind. Right? This vigilance is actually one of the elements within the mind training of the Buddhists. Right? This is one of the paramitas. You have the 6 paramitas, right? Generosity, patience, vigilance. These are the attitudes that we have to cultivate. And we've been vigilant for the ego. And we haven't been vigilant for our higher mind. So he's saying, who but the insane, right? Who but the insane would undertake to believe in what is not true and then protect this belief at all costs? Right, so this is the mind training. We have to recognize where we are. As the Buddha says, we are in a state of suffering or dissatisfaction. Why are we in a state of dissatisfaction? Why are we not settled and at peace? Because we are protecting the mind that's driven by desire. Right? The desire to get or the desire to avoid, the desire to love or the desire to hate. As long as we're in these two polarities, we will not know ourselves. So the mind training is first to recognize this is not who we are and there is another way. And just a little bit here. So in order to see the light, right, this calm presence of the witness that we are, in order to see it, and what he means by seeing is actually resting in it, understanding it, being it. In order to see, one must recognize that this light is within. It's not without. You do not see outside yourself, nor is the equipment for seeing outside. So this is a direct pointing back to your own consciousness. It is with you always, making vision possible in every circumstance. So he says, today we're going to attempt to reach that light. And we're going to do it through this process of meditation. He says it's particularly difficult for the undisciplined mind to meditate, and it represents a major goal of mind training. Meditation embodies precisely what the untrained mind lacks. Yet the training must be accomplished if you are to remember that part of your mind that is in the light, that sees, that is witnessing this all from a place of peace. So the untrained mind, remember, doesn't want this. That's why we have to train the mind in order to remember who we really are. And he says this, he says, the form of exercise, he says here, your mind is no longer totally or wholly untrained. You're quite ready to learn the form of exercise we will use today, but you may find that you will encounter strong resistance. Right. The reason is very simple. While you practice in this form, right, as you practice this meditation, you leave behind everything that you now believe and all the thoughts which you have made up. Properly speaking, this is the release from hell. Perceived through the ego's eyes, it is loss of identity and a descent into hell. So do you see the different perspectives? And you'll have the two voices showing up in your awareness. If you have this strong impulse to want to wake up and know the truth about yourself, that voice will be this irresistible pull to go into the witnessing state and meditate. There's going to be the other voice that inevitably shows up that embodies your resistance. And it will speak in your inner voice as you, and have you think that if you meditate in this way, that this is the annihilation of everything you want, everything you're living for. Well, what about this? And what about these desires? And what about those goals? And what about that agenda? That's the way the mind thinks at the lower level. And so you have to begin to discern the difference and realize one is pain, the other is joy. So the mind training will bring us joy. Just a couple of sections I want to read before we get into the meditation. This is Shantideva's The Way of the Bodhisattva. I think you're familiar with this. This is kind of the handbook for cultivating the mind of compassion in Buddhism. This is really at the center of the mind training teachings. And what we want to look at is his teaching on vigilance, right? We were just looking from the point of view of the Course, how vigilant we are in protecting our ego, right? We want to see that we can cultivate this vigilance in opening the mind. He says, those who wish to keep the trainings must with perfect self-possession guard their minds. Without this guard upon the mind, the trainings cannot be preserved. So the watching of the mind, the guarding of the mind, because otherwise you get pulled right back into those old neighborhoods, into those old patterns of belief, in those relationship dynamics, right? Without watching the mind, guarding the mind, you lose that connection to your higher desire, which would bring you into a state of peace rather than pain. He says, wandering where it will, the elephant of mind will bring us down to torment in the hell of unrelenting pain. No worldly beast, however wild and crazed, could bring upon us such calamities. In other words, our minds are the strongest enemy that we can have. There's nothing in the outer world that is more against us than an untrained mind. An untrained mind will wreck your life. It will wreak havoc on your peace, and it will set you up time and again for these episodes of suffering and despair. And it's not coming from the outside. The enemy is within. The enemy is the untrained mind, right? And remember, the ego is the voice that advocates for that untrained mind. Because to train your mind would abolish or dissolve the ego. So the ego thinks of the trained mind, the sane mind, as hell. So it's very aggressive towards training your mind. That's why he says in A Course in Miracles, if you begin to get on this path of wanting to train your mind, the ego goes from being suspicious of your motives because it never really is you, right? Because you're always the light of awareness. It's just as the decision maker, you made a decision to be the ego and fell asleep and forgot your truth. So the ego is always suspicious because you could wake up any instant. But the moment you want to wake up, it goes from being suspicious to vicious. And it will begin to attack you in some way, shape, or form. If you go to, find a community, you get into a teaching, watch what happens oftentimes. If you do make those steps, like there's a lot of resistance leading up to that you might get, hamstrung and waylaid by. But if you do break through those resistances and then you get into a community, there's going to be 1,000,001 other reasons why the ego says you're not in the right place. This isn't for you. This teaching doesn't make sense. It will do things to your mind within you that will have you side with your insanity and go back to thinking, yeah, the untrained mind is the better choice here. Right? You have to watch this because its goal, as Shantideva is saying, is to bring you into the hell of unrelenting pain. Many of us are getting a nice little, sampling of that right now. And hopefully that pain will be the motivation to go, you know what? I can see the trajectory of where this is all heading, and I don't want that anymore. I could see it. Now, even though this is like a wild elephant, my untrained mind, I'm going to pull on the reins. I'm going to do whatever it takes to bring this elephant to heel. He says, it's with mindfulness's rope the elephant of mind is tethered all around. Our fears will come to nothing. Every virtue, every blessing will drop into our hands. Right? Tigers, lions, elephants, and bears, snakes, and every hostile foe, those who guard the prisoners in hell, ghosts and ghouls, and every evil wraith. By simple binding of this mind alone, all these things are likewise bound. Right? There's no hostile force outside of you that can do you any harm once your mind is trained. By simple binding of this mind alone, all these are likewise bound. By simple taming of this mind alone, all these things are likewise tamed. For all anxiety and fear and pain and boundless quantity, their source and wellspring is the mind itself, as he who spoke the truth, Buddha, declared. Right? All of your pain, all of your suffering is the mind itself. The untrained mind is your suffering. Nothing else outside of that. That's why Buddhism is referred to as, a higher psychology. Like, what an amazing teaching. We get this in A Course in Miracles. A Course in Miracles is a psycho-spiritual mind training. That's what makes it so effective. You realize that it's all being done through your consciousness. There's nothing outside of your mind that is causing it. And then finally here, this body, running sore in human form, merely touched, it cannot stand the pain. I'm the one who grasped it in my blind attachment. Whom should I resent when pain occurs? Right? I chose separation. So why would I blame anybody else? We who are like children shrink from pain, but love its causes. I love that line. We, like children, shrink from pain, but we love the causes of pain. Right? There's an enticement, an attraction, a seduction that shows up first as the appearance, and then behind the appearance is pain. But we're like little children. Oh, it's glittery, it's shiny, it's pretty. And then all of a sudden we're in the pain. We go through the appearance and now we're in pain. So we love the causes of pain. We hurt ourselves through our misdeeds. So why should others be the object of our rage? And who indeed should I be angry with? This pain is all my own contriving. Okay? So this is where we take responsibility. This is what makes it Raja Vidya. This is what makes it a royal knowledge. You're not, the peasant mind wants to blame and find fault with external forces. That's pettiness. That's ignorance. The royal consciousness realizes I'm doing all of this to myself. And it's only through my own choice making that I can undo it. And as we just learned through Jesus' teaching and the Buddha's, it's through mindfulness. It's through quieting down and looking. So over the next few minutes, allow yourself to perform this mental hygiene. Confront these points of aggression, these scraps of meanness within your consciousness. Bring them up. First, calm your mind, settle into your breath. But once you're in a calm and relaxed state, bring up where you are triggered. Bring up what's pissing you off. Bring up where you're angry and resentful. And look at it. Feel into it. And without judgment, without expectation, allow that deeper wisdom of your sane mind to show it to you differently, not as the interpretation, but as it truly is in the light. in whatever form the aggression or the hatred or the anger takes. Underneath is a resentment for not having our desires met in some way, shape, or form. See that, feel that, this unmet desire that fueled the anger. And underneath the unmet desire, there's a sense of helplessness and hopelessness, of feeling trapped or limited. That feeling is what Shanti Deva just said was the choice to separate. And there's no one to blame. It was a choice made in ignorance. But no one did it to us. And now we're learning we can undo that choice. Know the truth and feel the freedom that comes with it. As we bring our hands to heart, let's make an inner vow to ourselves to be vigilant for this mind training, to find a community and a teaching that will bring the medicine that we need to heal our minds. Namaste, my friends. Blue bag is going to go around. If you're joining on Facebook or YouTube, you can simply click the link below and donate to the 8 a.m. service. We thank you for that. If you don't know already, we are not meeting for A Course in Miracles tomorrow night due to the holiday. So we'll resume next Monday at 7:15, but no class tomorrow night. All right, let's stand and seal the deal. Finding this peace and serenity within the center of the heart, knowing that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Have a beautiful morning. See you again. Thank you.